Thanks, Kelly, for enlightening discussion on slugs. We're going to shift gears here to talk about weather a little bit, but come back to slugs. Uh, Want to start with a brief review, as we typically do, and it's been certainly a colder than normal week. I think everybody can appreciate that after the hard freezes last Wednesday and Thursday, but beyond that, actually unseasonably cool conditions. And one of the themes that we've got here, though, there are, and probably everyone appreciates this, if you've been out and about, huge differences between northern and southern parts of the state. And we have had a subtropical air mass to our south here for the last several days, and for part of the state, at least for much of the southern half, the southern third of the state, we have gotten into that air mass, and it's been more like early summer. But to the north of that, where the warm air never reached, a continuation of unusually cool weather, actually significant snowfall on a couple days across portions of upper Michigan and the northern lower. And many instances, temperatures have not gotten out of the 40s. So we've had a huge disparity between conditions here, especially recently between north and south. For the week itself, you can see temperature departure is well below normal, generally 5 to 10 degrees Fahrenheit below normal. And again, depending on where you are, this has basically put a real stop to development in northern parts of the state, especially. While in the south, we have had some 80-degree days in the far south, and we've racked up a lot of degree days. So huge differences. The other big theme, and I'm gonna come back to this because it's a significant trend, and it's a double-edged sword here with impacts. But northern parts of the state have recorded significant precipitation. On more than one occasion. You can see that on the right-hand side here, much of northern lower and portions of the UP well up near an inch or even better, which is above normal. But as you go south into the southern lower, especially the parts of the central lower, virtually no precipitation has fallen. There have been some scattered showers there, but the system that's going through the state right now, the end of it, and yesterday, actually quite disappointing, and especially for the southern part of the state. It looked like we were optimistic about getting more rain or seeing more rainfall with that, but it has not materialized. We have some precip going on right now, and I'll get to that when we talk about the forecast. But the dryness, or the trend in dryness here, is obviously something long term. We've talked about that before, and so for significant portions of the state, it does continue. One of the big changes, though, with the cooler weather that I mentioned, given 2 cooler than normal weeks, and that's been the first time we've seen that this growing season. Large differences north and south, and we have degree days here recently, but that surplus in degree day units that we've had for almost all the growing season is almost gone. And you can see that here on the right with the light color, basically a couple days ahead of normal versus more than 2 calendar weeks ahead of normal here in the recent past. So the surplus that we had is almost gone. That's not atypical for this time of year as we move into, again, the warmer time or part of the season. So we're closer to normal. And beginning next week, I will begin, given our annual crop cycle, I'll begin showing you degree day units, base 50, beginning on May 1 to reflect closer to annual crop planting. So we'll be shifting, but at least these are from March 1, when basically we look at these for overwintering and insect development, et cetera. But where we were 2 weeks, we're down to a couple days at this point. The soil temperatures have, again, just like I mentioned with the temperature pattern, very cool in the north, still in the 40s for mean temperatures, but we have warmed up in the far south, especially the southwest corner of the state where it's been warmest, and some of the mean temperatures there are now up in the upper 50s. Obviously, given the dryness too, lots of opportunities to go out and really get some work done here for many people with warming soils, but not, again, in the north, cool soils have been a little bit of a hindrance, as well as some of the water. The issue with dryness and precipitation I mentioned, just one more thing about that, or a couple things. On the left-hand side here, and I've shown this before earlier in the year, but accumulated precipitation, this goes back to the beginning of the calendar year, The green here is the observed total. This is for cold water down in Branch County, representative of a lot of the southern portion of lower Michigan. The brown is the normal accumulation, and you can see that we clearly have fallen behind, especially over the last several weeks. There've been a couple of rain events, but in general, it's been too dry and deficits there. So right now, on the order of about 4 inches or so below what we should be. They're getting some rain there right now, which will help. And the outlook is more bullish in terms of precipitation, at least for more in the near future. And I'll get to that in just a second. One thing I did want to mention, though, on the right-hand side here, this is a graphic depicting something called the Evaporative Drought Demand Index, or EDDI, EDDI. And this one is one of the few drought-related indices that does not look specifically at how much precipitation we've had. Most of them do, or look at temperature of the foliage, that type of thing. This one is based on atmospheric demand. In other words, given current meteorological conditions, how much water potential is there lost to the atmosphere? And this is what this one is based on. And what is interesting to note for the current situation is that, and this reflects the last 2 months, so back to late February, the early part of the spring this year, there's been unusually high atmospheric demand, and that's a reflection of both the warmer temperatures, more sunlight. Those are the two big ones driving evapotranspiration, and also dry air there as well. And again, part of the issue in the situation we have right now with dryness is not just the lack of precip, it's the excessive or above normal demand. And that's, I think, an important piece of this. It's typically a time of the year where we don't see much demand because of limited temperatures, but this year has been an exception, and that's part of the, again, this year's story. And as finally, here's a result. I did want to show this, even though it's a week old. We'll get a new revision or revised version of this here later today. But for the drought index across the Great Lakes region, the upper Midwest, major changes. As you can see here, Michigan, even though the overall amount of area in the state, 80% of Michigan by area, either in D0, which is abnormally dry, or D1, the next step up to moderate drought. We still have that. There was a huge change in the D1, and we went from 17% the prior week up to 57% of the state, so more than half in moderate drought. And that's a huge change. Most of that increase came here in the northern half of lower Michigan and then into the eastern upper peninsula. So again, this is something at least to watch. This would be a completely different swoop, much more serious, of course, if we saw this 2 months from now instead of late April. But it is, depending on what happens with precipitation, we'll be watching, because it is dry for many parts of the state. It is dry out there. And while that has certainly benefited many to get a lot of field work done, especially when we look at the last couple of growing seasons here, ultimately we're going to need water for germination, stand establishment, et cetera. And I'm happy to say the outlook looks better for that. So that's where we are right now. On our weather map here this morning, the frontal boundary marking the northern edge of that subtropical air mass that's been in the state, or at least portions of the state for the last couple of days, that has pushed south. And you can see that on the map here now, moving towards the Ohio Valley. Cooler air, of course, filtered in behind it. There is another impulse of low pressure riding along that boundary, and that is leading to basically some scattered light rain to the far, to the northern edge of the system. That is impacting primarily the southern third or quarter of the state. And this actually, in terms of if you've been out and able to take advantage of the weather here and get something planted, this is almost an ideal or perfect type of event, because we're not looking at heavy rain. We're not looking at showers. This is a steady light rain. Most all of it's going to go into the ground, a tenth or two of an inch, but it should give you some moisture again in that top of the profile where you've just planted. So if you have gotten something planted recently, this will be a good one. But generally less than a quarter of an inch that we're looking at here across the southern, maybe 3 counties or so of lower Michigan. The north will be dry today, and then we'll look at essentially our next weather system is this cool front off to our north and west. That'll be making its way through the state tomorrow. And behind that, this big H here, big high pressure system. It's Canadian origin air, cooler and drier. Will set the stage for the coolest day of the upcoming week here tomorrow. High temperatures across the state only in the 40s to 50s, so we'll be below normal for the next, well, at least the next day. But after that high pressure, it's going to be moving fairly quickly, and it gets beyond us off to our east on Saturday. We'll see a very rapid and noticeable warm-up in conditions beginning on Saturday and then continuing through the rest of the weekend into early next week. But again, typical springtime pattern. Here's the map for Saturday morning. The next little weather system, this one is in the northern branch of the jet stream coming out of Canada towards us. That will lead to some scattered showers. These are nothing widespread, and you can even see it's possible it'll be cool enough, maybe some frozen precipitation to mix in at the beginning, but this is not a heavy producer for the northern part of the state. It's just almost a little nuisance type of thing. Most areas will remain dry. Southern and central portions of the state will also remain dry on Saturday as well. But as I also mentioned here before, we will see the wind shift around to the southwest, and that will usher in warmer, more seasonable air. So beginning on Saturday, you should notice a significant warm up. High temperatures back into the 60s to near 70 in the south. And on Sunday, for much of the state, we'll be back well into the 70s once again. With that Canadian origin air mass, and we've seen lots of issues with frost and freezing temperatures here the last week, but we do have the potential. We'll actually have some scattered frost in the far northern parts of the state overnight tonight, but that will be very, very localized. A better chance or more widespread chance on Friday night, Saturday morning, and that's what you see here. These are forecast temperatures. You can see that there's a significant influence of the water. This will be a classic radiation type freeze with relatively clear, calm conditions, with the lowest temperatures expected to be in interior areas, maybe some upper 20s, but for most of the state, we're talking low to mid 30s. So nowhere near in terms of severity of what we saw last week. So not looking for, a major event, but it is certainly, it'll be a cool morning, and there will be, there will be frost in many places, mostly in low-lying areas, but not a severe or hard freeze expected for most sites. And then beyond that, I mentioned the warm-up occurring temperature-wise. The next big weather system arrives probably very late Sunday or Monday. And what you see here is a numerical weather forecast product depicting conditions overnight Monday into Tuesday. Right now, this one looks like it has the potential for a significant rain event, more than certainly what we've seen here over the last 24 to 48 hours, and especially for the southern portions, let's call it the southern two-thirds of lower Michigan, some of the areas that have been missed by recent rainfall. But this one, actually, we could see at least half an inch, in some cases more than an inch is possible. It will be over an extended period of time, especially Monday into Tuesday. So that's the next big chance. And I think the bottom line is here, take advantage if you can. Again, if you've got the dry soils and so forth, because we are looking like this one, I think, is a fairly good likelihood. There will be certainly enough rain to stop field operations, but it'd be nice to get the water in the ground after you've planted. So make sure you can take advantage of what we have now with dry weather. In terms of total precipitation through the next week, with counting up what we have this morning and today in the southern part of the state, plus what comes early next week, you can see a real strong gradient from north to south. Relatively light totals, less than 1/4 of an inch in the far northern part of the state, to more than an inch across the south. So big differences from north to south, but given the situation with dryness, some of that is going to be helpful later on. And most of this precipitation you see here is expected again early next week. That will be in that event. In the medium range forecast guidance, it's fairly consistent, but there are some differences amongst the models. More of a west to east or zonal jet stream flow pattern across the U.S. One of the models, the U.S. medium range model, is suggesting maybe a return of some cooler air during the first week in May or late in the first week in May, but not all of them agree on that. But we have notably here recently, our mean temperature forecast has gone from warmer than normal to near normal. No forecast direction. The thing that is consistent, though, all of them have called for wetter than normal conditions with increased likelihood and passage of low pressure systems across the upper Midwest. So more frequent chances for precip than we've had, and probably, again, above normal of totals or amounts. So summarizing here, basically cooling down here over the next day, but certainly for northern parts of the state, dry. Some rain today in the far south, but not heavy. And then looking at a dry, most of the weekend will be dry with a warming trend beginning on Saturday, and then the next major chance for precip arriving by the beginning of next week. And as you saw with the medium range, probably more frequent chances for precip then. But again, with as always is the case here this time of the year, if you got the opportunity, make sure you take advantage of it here with field work. And I'll end up weather here and introduce our speaker for next week, Daniel Bublitz, who's going to be talking about rhizoctonia management in sugar beets. So don't miss that. That's again next Thursday, our first virtual breakfast in May. And with that, I'll wrap up and turn it back to Eric and Phil.